Hello, and welcome to my channel, Making Crafts. I'm excited to get started on my Christmas journal today, and so I'm going to show you how I make the cover. And this is the completed cover that we're getting ready to make. And in the video, I have not decided yet which way the rings are going to go, but I'll show you now. This is how I'm going to have them in the journal. I started adding some papers to the journal and realized that this was the best position for the rings, but I will show you all of that and how I created this journal in this video. So I'm going to be using an old book cover to create the cover for my journal, and I like the height of this one, so I decided to use it. And I'd already cut all the pages out. So what I do when I bring these home from the used bookstore, if I'm just buying them for the covers, then I go ahead and I take the pages out and then I trash them. Now, if you don't have a used bookstore near you with inexpensive books, then you can also go to the Dollar Tree. They have hardback books there as well, because you're going to cut all the pages out anyway, so it really doesn't matter what's on the pages. So I thought I would show you one here though that I have not cut the pages out of, and just show you how you're going to do that. So I use an X-Acto knife, and you have to be really careful with those because they are sharp. But if you see the book here, you can see a gap, and this paper here that's holding these two together, and you can see a gap there. We're just going to cut in that gap, but you're going to go lightly. You don't want to go deep, because you can start out slow and cut your way through it, gently, because you don't want to cut through the other side and cut your cover. So if you press too hard, you are going to cut your cover. So you can come back, and so like here I'm cutting very lightly. You can come back and you can cut more, as you go. You can make more than one slice. You don't have to get it all in one slice. And I got it in two, but you don't have to do that. You could take 5 if you wanted to. Just go real slow so you don't destroy your book cover. And I just get it started up here, but you don't want to poke through, like I said, to the actual cover. So just lightly cut through your paper here. And so I like these Reader Digest because they are shorter books, and I like a smaller journal like this in height. So I thought it would be fun to use one for my Christmas journal. Just have to keep working, because you're going to have some little tape in there, the book binding tape that holds it together. So you just slowly work it. Don't stab it, because you will stab into your cover. Trust me, I've done it before with some. And if you've got plenty of used books that you're going, that you've gotten free or inexpensive, then it's not as disheartening when you've done it. I had a bunch that I had gotten for free, so I could trash the ones that I messed up. So here is the whole book, and actually I may hold on to this one because I like, it's got some photos in it, and it also, the pages are really aged, so I might keep this one. And sometimes I may just pull out the pages that I want and trash the rest. So I'm going to set that aside. And I thought about using this one, but it has a wider spine. It's not that much wider though. Well, let's see here. It's a little bit. I could use either one, but I think I'm going to use this one. We'll see how it goes. I'm a little concerned with this one because it has this embossed image here, but I am going to be covering up part of the front with some of the paper from the kit, and I'm thinking about making a frame or painting a frame. We shall see. I want to try the cover first. It does have a texture to it, but we'll see how it goes. So I'm just going to cover the outside of the cover with some gesso. But before I do that, the way I'm going to put my pages, I'm going to get you this little thing here. So the way I'm going to put my pages in my journal is with one of these little clips here. I can't think of the name of them right now, but it's just a little ring binder. And so what I want to do is I want to mark the place on my cover, and then I want to put the holes in it. And I want to go ahead and do that before I paint it. So I just have an inexpensive mat from the Dollar Tree, and then I'm going to use this Fisker's hole punch. It has a hole punch, and then it has the setter on it. And I've decided that I want to come down about, oops, I got it in centimeters. I want to come down about 1 inch from the top. So I'm just going to mark a line of 1 inch, and then I'm going to use that as my guide. So then I'm going to punch my holes 1 inch apart from each other. So I just want to eyeball that in the center there of my cover, of the cover spine, and at the 1 inch mark. It doesn't have to be exact. So I think that's That's good. So then I'm just going to mark at 1 inch. And then I'm going to do the same thing at the bottom. So I'm going to measure up 1 inch. And then I'm going to mark my holes. And let's see here. I may just take, actually I may take and just line the ruler up here and mark. There. And then line it up on this side and mark so they're lined up together. You have to turn it this way. And then I'll measure again to make sure I have it right. Okay, so let's measure and make sure that's 1 inch apart. It is. And that looks centered up pretty good on the cover. Okay. I just want to see if they're lined up. I'm just looking to see. And that center circle doesn't matter because we're just going to paint over that. So we just want these to be sort of lined up. But I think that's close enough. Now I'm just going to line it up on my mat, and then I'm going to use the end that punches the hole. And I'm just going to center that over my dot, and then I'm going to punch the hole, which is rather loud. There we go. And then I'm going to do the same thing here. And then we'll do the same thing at the bottom. And there we have our holes in place. So now we're just going to cover this with gesso. So I'm also going to be using this frame on the front of my journal, and this is from the Tim Holtz baseboard frames, and I will link below to this as well. It's in the Rubber Buggy shop, and you get 8 pieces, so I've used some of them out of here, but I thought this one would work good for the cover. So what I'm going to do though is I'm going to gesso it as well and use the same paint technique on it. So the gesso has dried, and on my frame it's pretty much dried as well. I got a little spot here that came off, but I'm not worried about it. And so the frame will go on the front of the cover like that. So I want to start out by adding some black paint to the cover and to the frame. And I did find my larger brush. Well, this is not my larger brush. I borrowed a larger brush from my husband's workshop so that we didn't have all those paint marks or paint strokes all over the cover again when I'm using the black. Now I probably should put something under this. The white gesso washed up just fine with a baby white, but I am making a mess. I may not want to have to wash all that up again. So I just want to do a good coat of the black on this cover and on the frame. And then we'll come back with our Crackle paint or Crackle Medium, and we will layer that on top of this. I may not have needed the gesso, but I put the gesso on the frame and on the cover because I wanted to make sure the paint stuck to both, and so I figured the gesso would be a good way to prime it so that the paint would stick to both of these, because I didn't know if the cover was coated with anything or not. It was not. The cover does already have somewhat of a texture to it, so I'm hoping that doesn't mess up this effect. We will see what it does. Just a little bit more. Trying to get the edges there so that I don't have to come back and paint anymore, but I may have to. And I may have to do one more coat of paint since the gesso is showing through just a little bit. So I think I'll let this dry and then I'll come back and do one more coat on the cover. So let's just paint this frame real quick. So I've gone ahead and I've added 2 coats of black paint to my cover, and had I known I was going to use black, I could have ordered some black gesso, but I didn't. So the white gesso was fine. I just had to use 2 coats of my paint. And then I've painted the frame with 2 coats of black as well, and then I've tried to go on the inside and the outside of it. And we'll worry about the inside cover once we get the outside done. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add a coat of Crackle Medium. Now, I have never played with this brand of Crackle Medium before, other than today when I was making some samples, and I really like how it turned out. So I'm hoping, my sample was really small like this, so it's just a little piece of cardstock. So I'm really not cardstock, excuse me, chipboard, and I'm really hoping that it turns out like this. So I'm going to try to do about the same technique that I did earlier, and all I did was just put a good coating on that little piece. So your Crackle Medium will come from the Rubber Buggy. She packages it really good. She had it wrapped up in plastic, and I think I can't remember what all, but it was protected so that it would not spill on any of my other products, because I also at the same time ordered paper packs. I ordered, I can't remember what all I ordered with that, but I had lots of other stuff, and so the liquid was wrapped up really good. So, and I've never had a problem ordering from the Rubber Buggy and getting liquids and paper at the same time. I've never had anything mess up. She wraps everything really good. So this is really my first time using the Pentart Crackle Medium, but I liked what happened today. It is very thin, so I'm hoping that I can do this in a bigger area. The small area was easy. So we're going to see how it turns out. So I'm just going to add a good coating, because with Crackle Medium, the more you add, I think the better the crackle. And so I'm kind of going for an old weather barn look, and you'll see with my paper why I'm using these colors in a few moments. So I did do some samples. So for yours, you may want a different color combination. So what I did was I made a few little chipboard samples up using black, I used brown, I used a light tan, and then I used I think it was like a creamy color, like an antique parchment, maybe what it's called. And I just did samples to see which one I liked under the red. And I decided for the paper pack that this color would go best. It was in a running with the second runner-up for it would have been the light tan, but I decided to go with the dark because I really want it to show up. And I like the look of it. So you just add your base coat, and then you add your Crackle Medium on top, and then we'll come back once this is good and dry. I'm going to give it time to just dry on its own. I'm not going to rush it with my heat tool or anything. I'm going to come back, and then I'll add the red on top, and we'll do that together in just a few moments. Well, not a few moments. It'll be a few moments for you, but it will be quite a while for me. I let the paint on my book dry as well. I didn't rush it along with the heat tool. I just went and had lunch and let it dry. So now I think what I'm going to do is, once I get this on really good and on my frame, I will just set it aside to dry, and I will go work on some laundry and go hold my new kitten, give her some attention, because she's not had a lot of attention today because I've been busy working on projects in-house. So I'll give her some attention, and then once this is dry, I'll come back and I will finish it up. So let's just see. I'm just doing good coating on this, and so you can see this is very thin, so I've got a thick coating, but we will see how it turns out. Oh, and by the way, this Crackle Medium is water-based. Let me make sure I'm telling you right. It is water-based, so you can just use water to clean it up. I've got it on my hands. I'm trying to keep it off the bottle. So it's water-based. It says for making old-looking cracked acrylic paint layer. Protect from frost and replace cap tightly. And so that's what I've done. So I actually left my seal, if you can see, when I pulled my seal up earlier today, I left that in there, and I'm just using that to help me seal it up. I guess it could dry out if you didn't close it up tightly. I'm not sure. So I did not want to lose it. And there's so much, as you can see, it's a lot in here. Oops, I was holding it away from the camera. There's a lot in here, and it didn't take much at all to cover this whole book. I wasn't sure. I guess where it's so thin, it doesn't take that much. But you know, normally if it was thick, I think I would have took a lot more. And you can even tell I got any out of the jar yet. I'm gonna go ahead and stop it. I'm gonna lay something underneath these and clean my mat off. So I started painting the cover and then realized my son was like, your camera is not on. He walked past my craft table and saw that the camera wasn't even on. So I missed showing you how I painted this, but I just put a good coat of the red paint over the black. And I think I did not wait long enough. I was just too excited to try this. And so you can see right there in the middle is a big black spot. That's where some of the paint just wouldn't stick. It kind of rolled off. But that's okay because we're going to be covering that part anyway. But I should have gave it a little bit longer to dry. I think I gave it maybe an hour or two, but it probably was a little tacky when I started painting over it. So I should have been more patient. So next time I think I would just let it dry overnight and then come back the next day and do the top coat of paint. But I'm very happy with how this turned out. I really like the big cracks that it made, and I like the looks of this, so I am thrilled with it. And so I thought I would just show you how I'm painting the frame so you can kind of get an idea. Pretty much painting the frame the same way that I painted the cover. About the same amount of paint is being added over the black paint, or actually over the Crackle Medium. And so I did about the same amount of coating as I did on the cover. But I do like how it turned out, so the only thing is that where the paint rolled off, so I probably would next time wait a little longer. So it's been a few days since I was working on this one, so the red paint has dried thoroughly, and I really like how it looks. But I want to come back around some of the edges of the book and of the spine and that little dip. You have the spine, then you have a dip and a little edge on the front of your cover. I just want to go through and highlight those edges just a little bit with the black paint. So with this makeup sponge, I'm getting a very little bit of paint on the sponge so that it's very light. And then I'm just going to go through and highlight these edges before I seal my cover. So I want to do this before I add the sealant to it, which I'm going to be using the Decoupage and Varnish, and I'll show you that in a moment. So I think that these edges, just highlighting the edges, I think just adds a little bit more to the cover. You wouldn't have to do this if you didn't want to, but I think that it just helps the frame out the cover. You know, helps it stand out, helps to frame the cover a little bit. And I like using makeup sponges with my paints to do things like this. I feel like I can control it better than other ways. So I'm just wiping a little of the paint off here. I just got a little bit too much in that spot. So I'm just going to speed it up here so you can see all the edges that I highlighted, but we'll speed through this part. So I'm going to be using Christmas Vibes by Ciao, and this is going to be my journal pages as well as I'm going to use it for my cover. So I've already gone through and picked out what I want for the cover, and I want to use one of these 4x6 cards under the frame, and I think all of them look good. Some, like this one's one of my favorites as well. I like the poinsettias. the Christmas tree, part of the Merry Christmas is cut off, and then the season greetings. So the wreath is my favorite. I just really love the looks of the wreath on the front. So I've just cut the wreath out, and then I'm going to attach it to the frame. And so I'm just going to use some Fabri-Tac for this because the frame has kind of a slick feeling on the back. So I'm using the Fabri-Tac, but I think that your art glitter glue, any glue should work. I really like using Fabri-Tac, so that's what I'm going to use. And all I'm doing is I'm just going to coat my frame really good with the Fabri-Tac, and then I'll come back and I'm going to add this little 4x6 card. Now I'm just going to adjust the card by the front of the card, you know, the image, and I'm just going to line the frame that way because it has a little ribbon across the top of the frame, above the frame, and below, excuse me, it has a ribbon above the wreath in the image as well as below, and so I want to just make sure that that's kind of lined up evenly at the top and bottom. So by doing that, I have a little bit hanging over on the edge there. So I'm just going to come back with my X-Acto knife and I'm going to just trim it off. Now I could have, if you're not wanting to use an X-Acto knife and do this part, you could just be a little bit more fussy with it before you glued it on and trim it off. I wasn't really worried about it. I thought I would just line it up and then trim the excess off once I got done because I think it's easier for me that way. So there is a little bit of white edge after I did that, so I'm just coming back with that little sponge where I sponged the edges, and I'm just going to sponge the edges of the frame as well. And that way, if any of the edge of the paper, the white of the paper shows, it'll be covered up with the paint. And here is the completed framed out wreath. I really love how it looks. So now we're just going to attach it to the front of the cover. And so I have not sealed the cover yet. I'm going to wait till I have the whole thing glued up and then I'll seal it. So now I'm just going to add Fabri-Tac to the back of this card piece, but I think you could use any of your craft glue, your art glitter glue and things like that stick really well. You could even probably use hot glue if you wanted to, but I'm just going to use the Fabri-Tac again. So then I'm just going to center it up on my cover. And I'm just trying to line it up from side to side and top and bottom. And so now I'm going to come back with the Pin's Art Decoupage and Varnish glue. And I did get the matte finish. And so I'm just going to paint this over the entire cover. And here is where I had a little bit of trouble. If you go back and forth over it too much, you could loosen your paint. So just do this lightly. If you want to do 2 coats, come back and do 2. But I finally only did 1. But you do have to be really careful that you don't loosen up any of your paint. Keep in mind, I am painting this over a book cover that has texture and kind of a slick feel to it. What I probably should have done in hindsight before I put the gesso on the cover, I should have sanded the cover some to get a little bit more tooth on that slick filling cover. I'm really not sure what the cover was made out of. So if you were doing this on not cardstock, excuse me, on chipboard or something like that, I don't think you'd have to worry about it as much like I am. But once I sealed it, everything seems stuck really good now. But before you seal it, it could come a little loose, I believe. Now I didn't have a lot of trouble. As you can see here, I'm just painting it on and I didn't have, a huge amount of trouble with it. But when I think about the process, if I had another cover with the texture like this one had and the slick feeling of it, it almost had, I'm not sure, almost like a faux leather kind of feel maybe not that much. Maybe a vinyl sort of feel. It wasn't paper feel. It had more of a texture, a slick feeling to it. So if I was to do that type of cover again, I probably would sand it a little just to add a little tooth to it to get a little grip on it. But this worked out just fine. Once I had it sealed, everything has stayed just fine. And hopefully tomorrow I'll have the next video up because I have been working with it and I've started adding some pages to it. And so hopefully tomorrow I can show you more of the process. It just depends on how much time I have today of getting the videos ready for you. So once I paint all around or seal all around the cover. I'm going to come back and seal the frame, but I'm also going to put some of this decoupage and varnish glue over top of the cardstock that's inside the frame, just to give everything the same finish to it. And it kind of just adds a little bit more protectant to your cardstock on the front, which I'm just going to be using this one as my Christmas journal for 1 month, so it's not really going to, have a lot of wear and tear. Well, it may be 2 months. It may take me to January to add the Christmas photos from all the Christmas get-togethers, since those do happen, Christmas Eve and Christmas Day and days like that, and sometimes after Christmas. So it may be January that I'll be working as well, but it doesn't have to be super tough for me, because I'm not going to be putting it in my purse or anything. It's just something I'm going to be working on at my craft station. And so I do lightly come back here, I'm showing you, and add the decoupage and varnish glue over top of the paper as well. And just be careful when you do that. Anytime you add decoupage glue, any decoupage glue, not just this one. Actually, this one seemed to be thicker and not as watery as the one I've used before of other brands. So it wasn't as hard, but some decoupage glues will cause your paper to bubble or to ripple, so be very careful. So I did just do this one lightly, but like I said, this is a really thick decoupage glue, so I really like that it's not so watery. Now, if you do rub just a little bit of your paint off, you can always come back, add some of the paint back, and then just revarnish over it. And I had one little spot that I did have to do that, but it was a very small spot, and I think I was just being very picky that day. So here is the completed cover, and I love the whole finish on it. And you can see that it's a little bit shiny, but not a lot, because I did go with the matte decoupage varnish. You could go with a shinier one, but when you seals it, anytime you seal anything, it does make it a little shiny. So now let's finish the cover by working on the inside. So I've gone ahead and I have used 2 coats of black paint around the edges of the inside. And I only did the edges because I'm going to be covering it up with cardstock and fabric, so you won't have to, you don't have to cover the whole inside, paint the whole inside of your cover. So I have a piece of scrap fabric here that I thought looked really good with this paper. And so what I'm going to do is I just went ahead and tore it down. I didn't even worry about cutting it. I just tore it down to the size that I wanted. And now I'm just going to add a good coating of the Fabri-Tac to the spine of my cover. And so what I'm doing is I am just covering normally I'll just, put lines of glue when I'm gluing something down. But for this one, I am getting a good coating on the inside. Not a thick coating, because it may come through my fabric, but a thin coating that covers the whole bit of the inside of that little spine. And then I'm going to just press my fabric down into the spine. Now, I did not cover with glue, the entire area that this is going to be glued down. I'm just doing a small section at a time so that I can get it pressed down really good before the glue dries. And then I'm going to get it all pressed down good, and then I'll just continue to add glue and press it down. But if I add a lot of the glue, what I find is sometimes when you're trying to position it, this glue will start to dry, and then you have a little bit of issues. So then I'm just going to fold the fabric back and add more glue. And I'm not adding the glue to the fabric, but to the actual book cover. Sometimes I find that if I add the glue to some fabrics, it seeps through easier. So by lightly putting a light coating onto the cover and then pressing, I didn't have issue of the glue seeping through. Now this is almost like a quilter's cotton fabric. I don't remember where I got this fabric, but I'm pretty sure I got it out of the quilting section, so it's cotton. But I can't promise that because I have so many different little pieces of Christmas fabric. Sometimes I buy the fat quarters from Walmart for my journals, and so I don't remember. I'm thinking this one though was from Joann's and it was out of the quilting section, but I do have 2 different snowflake fabrics, so it's hard to keep up with it all. And this was just a scrap left over from a Christmas journal I did. I'm thinking it was the one I did maybe 2 years ago. So I hold on to all my scraps though, because you can find uses for them. And so I'm just going to clean out any glue that oozes around the edges. And if you have any glue that oozes, you can just wipe it up with a baby wipe or wait and come back with a glue eraser and just rub it off. This glue seems to rub off easily when you do things like that with the glue eraser. And so I do want to get my fabric down good and tight, because then I'm going to come back with the cardstock over it, and I don't want it to cause my cardstock to not glue down tight. Now when I am adding the glue under the fabric, like I said, I'm not adding a thick coating of glue. It's a light coating, but I'm coating it really good so that everything sticks down really well. And if you remember at the beginning, we went ahead and punched holes in our spine. So we're going to have to come back and do that in a moment as well. So now I have gone ahead and cut down 2 pieces of cardstock to fit the inside of my cover. Now I'm not giving measurements for this, because if you're going to use an old book, your cover is going to be totally different size from mine. So I'm just going to show you the technique, and then just measure for your cover. What you want to do is probably measure your cover and then maybe take off 1/4 of an inch or 1/2 of an inch, depending on how much you want around your paper. So as you can see with mine laying there, you can see about 1/8 of an inch around the top, bottom, and side. So I just trimmed it down to a smaller size than what each side of the cover was. And you don't even have to measure. You can cut your paper down close to it and then keep trimming until you get the right size, if that's what you need to do. So I'm just using the fabric tack again to attach it. Since I am going to be attaching the cardstock to the fabric, I felt that it was best to use my fabric tack. Now you can use, I think there's one called by the same company called All-in-One glue, or 3-in-1. I'm not sure now, but if I see it in the shop, I will link to that as well. But you can, I think you could use that as well, but I've always just used the fabric tack. I've never tried the other one out. And so as you can see, I'm just adding a good coating to the back of the cardstock, but not enough to just get it, you know, to change the texture and make it raised up. Like if you add too much fabric tack, sometimes you, if it starts to dry on you, it can leave some lines behind your cardstock. So just do a light coating. And I love this paper. I always love Ciao Christmas papers. I made a journal last year using their papers, and I love this new collection that they have, and I thought these papers were just gorgeous, so I'm so excited to use them. So I'm coming back with my Fiskars, I think you call it Fiskars Hole Punch maybe, or Fiskars Punch, and it helps, it'll set the eyelets, but it'll also punch holes for you. And so I'm coming back, and what I did is I just put it down in the hole that we had already made, and then I am just re-punching the hole through the fabric. Now I will say fabric is a little harder to punch holes through, because you know you have the threads and things, so I just had to work with it and keep punching until I got the fabric cleared out. And so when I flip it over, you can see that the fabric is still attached just a little bit. So I'm just going to come in with my X-Acto knife and use that to help trim the little threads that are hanging on and don't want to let go. So now I'm going to add the rings. So I couldn't decide which way I wanted to do the rings. So one way I slid them in so that when you closed your ring, you had the little hinge on the inside to the left, or to the right, excuse me. And so the outside you could just see the ring, smooth ring. And then another way I was thinking that I wanted to try was to put the ring in so that the hinge is on the outside and then it just closes on the inside. And so like I showed you in the beginning, what I found when I started adding the papers were that the hinge needs to be on the outside, and I will show you in another video why it needs to be on the outside. So here is the completed cover, and I really love how it turned out. Like I said, decided that the hinge rings need to be on the outside, because when you go to put your journal together, I'll show you why when we start putting the journal together. But I do love how this turned out. I love the rustic look of it, and I love these papers on the inside. And one thing I forgot to tell you in the video is before I added the papers, glued the papers down, I did go ahead and ink around the edges, just, you know, like we use our ink and sponge, and just inked around the edges. Let me see if I have one here. This, you know how we normally use this. And so I just inked around the edges and then glued them down. And so I hope that you will give this a try. I really am having fun with the Crackle Medium from Pentart, and I have another project that I'm going to do for the new year, and possibly if I have time, I have another Christmas project I want to do using the Crackle Medium. And so I hope that you have enjoyed this little tutorial, and thank you so much for watching. And by the way, I forgot to mention, I think I did not mention anywhere in the video, be honest, the video has taken me several weeks to create. We've had a lot going on. So this is my design team project for the rubber buggy, if I did not mention that. And all of these projects were sent to me from the rubber buggy. But even though these were sent for free, these are my opinions of these products. These are my true opinions, because I don't want to ever recommend something that I wouldn't use myself. So these are my true opinions of them, and I do get to choose the products from the rubber buggy. So these are products that I would choose if I were, ordering as well when I'm purchasing, and I do purchase items from the rubber buggy all the time. Well, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.